Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. Special treat for you today, a little bit of me, and then I'm going to give way to both Jeff Sentell and Kaylee Mansell for some UGA recruiting talk that's recorded live here today. So I'm obviously away. I'm on some vacation time this week. Recruiting news that has been taking place the last couple of days, which I've not been able to talk to you about because I'm not live. Well, Jeff and Kaylee will catch you up on all of that here during this space today. But prior to that, we've got some fun. Paul Finebaum in a moment going to echo something I would say that we kind of said on yesterday's show, reinforcing the point perhaps a little bit further. And in a few minutes, maybe for me, what is the single most disappointing aspect of the Kirby Smart era, or to say it a different way, the one thing that has left me kind of feeling the most pain as a fan in the Kirby Smart era. This will be kind of fun. I promise it's more fun than it sounds. We'll get to that here coming up in just a moment. Glad to have you with us for it. As DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Breda Pest Management. They handle bugs and critters.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Every now and then, weird things, small things, seemingly unimportant things make me a little aggravated. An example of that, something that I read at ESPN.com the other day, kind of got my blood stirred up just a little bit. I'm going to give you an example of this later on, and I'm going to explain why it actually kind of leads into what is probably the single most, speaking as a sports fan here and a Georgia fan in particular, the sort of most painful thing about being a Georgia fan the last few years. And by the way, if this is as bad as it gets, then things are pretty good. I'm going to give you that coming up in just a moment. Prior to that, though, let me kind of begin with where we were yesterday. You know, we're looking ahead to, and it's going to be here before you know it, SEC Media Days and the questions that all the various coaches are going to face at SEC Media Days. And we've been doing that the last couple of days for cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. We won't be doing that today because in a few minutes I'm going to give way to both Jeff Sentell and Kaylee Mansell. They're going to do kind of a special version of their show, Before The Hedges, presented by Kroger, in our space today. So it's live, recorded, in the moment recruiting talk coming up for you here in just a bit. You're going to love that. But the last couple of days, and even going back to Friday on our cruising around the SEC segment, courtesy of Royal Caribbean, we've been looking at like big questions for all of the SEC coaches, for the SEC programs, as we move towards SEC Media Days. And what we said was yesterday on the show, well, if we're going to do that for the rest of the SEC, it seems sort of appropriate to do that for Georgia. And you'll remember what we said was, okay, we know in some form or fashion the questions about Georgia center around the offense, whether it's related to Mike Bobo, hot topic in kind of the early days of 2025, Gunnar Stockton, a little bit of a hot topic lately, offensive line, which has sort of been a kind of a big discussion point throughout all of this process, you know, replacing, you know, and correcting a little bit of a drops issue at wide receiver, whatever sort of sub issue you gravitate towards. The big issue at hand for Georgia is how things are going to play out with the offense here in 2025. And what I said is, on top of that, we know the questions are about offense. And what I said was, how confident will Kirby Smart be when he speaks about this? And you'll remember, we said, you know, in the past, when Smart kind of knew there was a narrative coming, at times he's sort of at the ready on this. And he's got his talking point or his pushback on whatever that narrative might be, fighting against complacency or things like that. Smart's just sort of ready for this stuff in the past. He knows and has an anticipation of what the questions are going to be. So how much will he be anticipating the topic of his offense here this July, and will he be ready to confront that when it takes place? That's what we said yesterday. You perhaps heard that. It is interesting for me that in a recent conversation that Paul Finebaum had with the two radio hosts, Greg McElroy and Cole Kublik, who you also know as SEC ESPN analysts, Finebaum, in that discussion, when speaking about media days, essentially said a very similar thing about Kirby Smart. What he was and what he is kind of intrigued about seeing from Smart when it comes to SEC Media Days. This is from the sports radio station in Alabama called WJOX. This is Paul Finebaum, and I think the words from Finebaum here only serve to reinforce what we have also said on our show this week. This is Finebaum.
I'm really intrigued by Kirby Smart because he's got he's the best coach in the country. He's got probably overall the most consistent program. But are they missing something? How confident is he in Gunnar Stockton? When I saw him recently in Destin, he was having fun with it. Now that's Kirby being Kirby, though, Greg. I had taken a shot at Gunnar Stockton earlier in the day, and Kirby made sure that he appreciated it. But that's just a smart coach, not one that wears his heart on his sleeves.
So are they missing something, Finebaum says? Now, we know that Kirby Smart's not going to sit down in front of a podium at SEC Media Days or stand there at the podium and say, guys, I got to tell you, we're missing something. I got to tell you, there's an important component of winning a championship, and I just don't think we have it. Of course, he's not going to say that, but let's be fair. Back during spring practice and things like that, Smart did talk about what he wanted to see more of from Georgia. You remember him saying that they're harping on being better running the football, being better at stopping the run. So what Smart perceives as a kind of a deficiency with Georgia, he hasn't shied away from talking about that. And so there will be some of that almost certainly in a few days here at SEC Media Days when Smart faces those kinds of questions. But ultimately, what Finebaum says there is, it's remarkable how similar it is to what we said on the show yesterday, which really what this comes down to is what is Kirby Smart's tone? Does Kirby Smart reflect a confident tone, and does he have a laughing disregard at the inquisition about your starting quarterback and your offensive coordinator and all these things that have been fodder for those to sort of conjure up some hot takes about Georgia? How confident does Kirby Smart sound if he chooses to refute some of that at SEC Media Days? And as Finebaum points out in that clip from the McElroy and Kublik show, when Paul interviewed Kirby at SEC spring meetings of the day, it was all in good fun. We played this clip plenty. It's meant for entertainment value. Smart's not serious when he says it, but my experience in life leads me to believe that people are only kind of laughing and joking when they have enough self-confidence to relax, enough to be humorous. And when Finebaum was on with when Kirby was on with Finebaum the other day, he was relaxed enough, apparently confident enough in his team situation that he could laugh off the criticism that Finebaum had been throwing his way, going back with SEC, spring meetings and the stuff that Finebaum had been saying on TV about that prior to that. In fact, let's go through this with a couple of clips here, starting with, Kirby letting Finebaum know he had heard the stuff that he'd been saying on ESPN.
I appreciate all your questioning of it because it just gives me a little extra.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you missed an earlier interview I did on ESPN because I
didn't miss it. I didn't miss it.
Okay.
Georgia will be fine or not fine with Gunnar Stockton now their starting quarterback.
I would say that's a big not fine. I know the team coalesced around him after the SEC championship game, but I was underwhelmed by what I saw from Gunnar Stockton in the Sugar Bowl loss to Notre Dame.
So Paul Finebaum goes on TV and says, Georgia's not going to be fine with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback, and Kirby Smart made it very clear to him, I heard what you said. And he's smiling when he says it, but it's also an example of the fact that Kirby's not worried about being fine, apparently, with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback. In fact, he went on to tell Finebaum, not only did I hear this, but we made sure that Gunnar Stockton heard this as well. Here's Kirby Smart again.
I just always hope that when I say these things at a busy time like this, that you are not. But I'm looking at a man whose job it is to tell you what's being said, right?
Yeah, I'm excited. Gunnar got the message, man. He got the message. You did your job.
Okay. Listen, I have admired you and respected you for so many years.
Absolutely.
And I feel like at this point in your career, you need a little help from me.
I appreciate
to get you to the first game and over the finish line.
I'm glad you did. You've always been. That's why I always come on your show, because I love the fact that you give me that motivation.
There's like a 2-week period or a very short period. It's like sort of like Mother's Day to Memorial Day. You kind of get that version of Kirby Smart, relaxed, kind of joking around. Like any other time the rest of the year, it's just, obviously, burning the candle at both ends. But that little brief period in May is like the most relaxed I think you ever hear Kirby. And so he's mostly joking there. But there is truth in humor, and the fact that Kirby feels like he could joke about Gunnar Stockton, and you've heard us, goodness knows if you listen to the show on a regular basis, you've heard me say this before because we've said it certainly plenty, that if Smart was willing to joke about that, then he must be confident enough that it's okay to laugh about this. And if you listen to yesterday's show, we went back to media days in 2022 when Kirby Smart was saying something to the effect of, oh, please ask me about being complacent because we're not going to be hunted at Georgia. We're going to be the hunters. In other words, I want these questions about being complacent after winning a national championship because I believe not only am I ready to provide the answer, I think our team is going to provide the answer on the football field this fall, and they did to the tune of a second straight national championship. So as someone who's a Georgia fan, I am, most of you are, wouldn't it be awesome? And frankly, I don't know that that's what we get. I don't know because as we've told you, you've got different degrees of willingness to confront some of this stuff from Kirby Smart in recent months. But if Smart is as ready to answer questions about his offense, whether it be related to Gunnar or Bobo or whatever else, if he is as ready to answer those questions coming up in a couple of weeks at SEC Media Days as he was about the issue of complacency way back in 2022, then boy, wouldn't that speak something very, very strong about Georgia. Finebaum says it. I'm intrigued by what we hear from Kirby Smart. I am too. Smart's one of these guys a little bit different than some coaches. Some coaches just kind of want to get in, get out. They want to make nothing in the way of headlines. It's just a box they have to check. It's like the old NFL thing of I am literally here just so I don't get fined. And obviously Kirby's certainly not always a friend of the media necessarily, but I do think he sees the value in media days of helping him amplify the message he wants to send to his team. He uses it as a tool, in other words. And it would be certainly very compelling if Smart uses that media days appearance to express the confidence that with Finebaum in a one-on-one interview, he certainly expressed back in May. That's one of the things we'll be watching media days for very closely. I've said it. Paul Finebaum says it. And I think most of you would probably agree with it as well. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. We're so happy you're with us. Normally it's live, today pre-recorded, only a couple more days of that, and we have a portion of today's show that's going to be live here in just a moment when we say hello to Jeff Sentell and Kaylee Mansell. But even when can't be here live and not doing the show in sort of the normal cadence, we just really appreciate you being a part of it, and I'm so thankful to our friends at Breda Pest Management who make it possible for us there as well. Protecting your home from bugs and critters, keeping termites away, keeping mosquitoes out of your yard, really providing a high level of service, something that Breda Pest Management has been famous for since 1975. About multiple generations of the Breda family out there serving you that way. Matt Breda, big Georgia fan, loves sports fans in our area. He has served so many of the people in our audience. And here's one of the main aspects of that service. Obviously, the quality of service that Breda Pest Management provides you is, of course, top-notch. But because of the track record of success that I've mentioned before, they're going to be able to leverage that for your benefit by putting more money back in your pocket just for making the switch. And let's face it, these days, who couldn't use a little bit more money in their pocket? Well, that's what our friends at Breda Pest Management are all about. So when you make the switch for your termite protection, when you trust them to keep bugs and critters out of your home, you're going to get more money back just for making that decision. That fly-by-night company you've been working with, where the cost of service keeps going up year after year, that's not going to happen with Breda Pest Management. So I want you to find them online today. It's BredaPest.com, BREDA, BredaPest.com for a lot more on that. Of course, it's great to have you as a part of DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management here today. And as I told you, we're about to do something really fun in a moment. We're going to say hello to Kaylee Mansell, Jeff Sentell. A lot of recruiting stuff's been happening. I've not been able to talk to you about that because I'm not here live this week, but they are live here today. So if you're watching on video or if you kind of catch it up on demand after the fact, in the moment, recruiting reaction to all the news that's been going on the last couple of days, they're going to give that to you here in just a moment. Prior to that, though, let's go around the Doghouse, presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. And I talked the other day about an overused phrase by fans that kind of gets on my nerves. Let me give you another overused phrase from fans, and let me also admit that I'm about to kind of play into this just a little bit. You know how opposing fans, when bad news happens to a rival, they'll go running to kind of get the tears. They talk about that. I can't wait to hear those sad Georgia fan tears. It's just one of the things that college football fans do. And frankly, we probably do a version of that ourselves with our hated rivals when kind of bad news befalls them. So for those who love sort of Georgia fan tears, let me give you the one thing in recent years that has kind of caused some Georgia fan tears for me. And thankfully, oh my gosh, thankfully, we have a very spoiled existence as Georgia fans as of late. But let me tell you the one thing that Georgia came very, very close to doing. Apparently much closer than people realize. Very, very close to doing. And if they could have done it, we would have had bragging rights forever. I was reminded of this here this week. Our friends over at ESPN.com wrote a story about the most unbreakable records in college football. And number one on the list, according to ESPN, of the most unbreakable records in college football is Oklahoma's 47-game winning streak, a number that, for whatever reason, I've always been kind of aware of. 47 games, the old Bud Wilkinson era. And there was something that Chris Lowe at ESPN.com wrote as he was writing about this feat for Oklahoma. Boy, it just sort of crawled all over me, bringing back a bad memory that apparently others are not quite so aware of. Let me read this to you from ESPN.com and tell you why it matters. So according to ESPN, the most unbreakable record in college football is Oklahoma's 47-game winning streak. And in talking about this, among other things, Lowe writes, nearly 70 years later, nobody's come close to that streak. He says Toledo won 35 straight games from 1969 through 1971, Miami from 2000 through 2002, and USC through 2003 through 2005, each won 34 games in a row. He says, even though, this is the part that matters to us, even those star-studded Georgia teams under Kirby Smart failed to, as he says, seriously challenge the mark. The Bulldogs won 29 in a row during their run to back-to-back national championships in 2021 and 2022. Now, let me tell you why this kind of frustrates me for a moment, both in terms of, apparently people don't remember this, but also in terms of how close Georgia came, closer than people realize, to what ESPN is saying is the most unbreakable record in college football. It is true that Georgia won 29 straight games from its national championship in 2021 through the conclusion of the 2023 season heading into that SEC championship. But did you know that prior to that loss in the 2021 SEC championship, they had also won 16 games in a row prior to that, all 12 in that year's regular season, and 4 games to conclude the 2020 season. So that's 16 straight, then a loss. Another 29 straight, then a loss. Folks, Chris Lowe, ESPN.com, says Georgia didn't come close to doing that, but they were one loss away from having won 45 straight games. And they were another loss away from playing in the college football playoff for a chance to tie the winning streak all-time consecutive games. Now, if you're an Alabama fan right now, boy, you love this. You love this. Oh, that's what we prevented you from doing. And you're right. If you want Georgia fan tears, I'll give you some Georgia fan tears for that. Because I would have loved to have had the nation's longest winning streak in the history of college football. I would also gently nudge you in this direction. If your bragging rights against Georgia right now is, ha, 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 we prevented you from having the longest winning streak of all time, if that's what your trash talk against Georgia's been reduced to, then I hate to tell you this, but your existence is kind of falling on hard times. If that's the pain point for Georgia of, oh gosh, if not for a lost Alabama in the 2021 SEC championship and a lost Alabama again in the 2023 SEC championship, if not for those losses, one of which, by the way, Georgia avenged, if not for those losses, the other one only coming by 3 points, if not for those losses, Georgia would have a real legitimate shot at the longest winning streak of all time. If that's if that's what you're bragging about against Georgia, then I guess good for you, I guess. But it does, admittedly, it does frustrate me a little bit because, man, Georgia was so close. I mean, closer than people realize to having a real legit shot at what is essentially an unbreakable record. Now, to kind of pile on this point a little bit too, this did not make the list, but the sort of like also receiving votes category. Florida has, and I forget, it's like 500 something games. I forget what it is. Like the longest streak without being shut out in college football history. But a lot of y'all remember this. You remember back in 2017 when Georgia won, scored 40-something points, but did give up with backups in the game, that sort of late touchdown at the end. Georgia came within an eyelash of shutting out Florida because they really loved that not shutout streak. And Georgia had a chance to also, sort of break that record too, which would have been a really fun thing. But when Chris Lowe says nobody's come close to breaking Oklahoma's record of 47 straight wins, I mean, listen, it's only 16-29, but that's like 45-2 over a 47-game stretch. The idea that that's not coming close to breaking the record, I'd say that's not quite the way I see it. And admittedly, there have been a couple of at least figurative tears shed over the fact that, boy, if Georgia could have just found a way and won or both those games, then the chance at breaking a streak like that would have been a lot more realistic than I think that people perhaps realize. But anyway, we'll make that Around the Doghouse here today, presented by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. Now, speaking of Georgia Farm Bureau, no tears shed for me when it comes to them. I love what they do for our audience. The fact that they're serving folks when it comes to your insurance needs. And legally, auto insurance, home insurance, these are things that you have to have. And when you make that choice, of who to work with from an insurance standpoint, the one thing that you want is you want like a friendly voice on the other side of the phone. Well, that's why our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau are such an important resource for you, because they're always the home team. They are Georgians. The agents, the claims adjusters, all the people kind of up and down the line there, they are Georgians just like you, going to work every day, cheering for the dogs, so many of them do, in communities just like yours all across the great state of Georgia. And that means when you choose to work with them, you're choosing to work with people who are kind of in it with you. And that's why I think you should reach out to Georgia Farm Bureau today and find out why they are always the home team. You can give them a call, 877-404-1050. That's 877-404-1050, or online, gfbinsurance.com. We love having Georgia Farm Bureau as a part of Around the Doghouse here today. We also love having each of you with us here. I've had the great pleasure of speaking to you, but on a week in which I can't be live, and there is so much recruiting news taking place, feels like a great time to hear from our two teammates as a part of Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, our DawgNation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell, and the wonderful Kaylee Mansell. They're going to get you up to date on everything happening with Georgia recruiting live right now. So let's say hello to them here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is going to be a special edition of Before the Hedges, which is DawgNation's go-to weekly breakdown on all things Georgia recruiting. We cover who's coming, who's leaving, what's next, and why it matters. In picking up 16 commits, the month of June was one to remember for the Dogs, and today we plan to break it all down here on Before the Hedges.
It's the intel about the next generation of Bulldogs. This is Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger.
Let's go, I'm a Bulldog. So Georgia, who I'm picking.
So before we get started, I just have to applaud you on even having the mental bandwidth to be here today.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. 16, it's Sweet 16, Kaylee.
Like it.
We got 16 in a month. Here's some fast class facts. Folks, there's some schools right now, they don't even sign 16 high school players, period, anymore. They're mostly in the portal. You got Georgia adding 16. That is a record. Well, actually, you want to goose it up a little bit. It's actually 18, counting the two 2027 commits as well. And, Kaylee, we've went far and wide, spanning not maybe the globe like Wild World of Sports style, but definitely spanning the Southeast and covering a lot of these stories.
So we were actually lucky enough to get sent some inside information on what Jeff looked like in his office on Monday night after it was all wrapped up. We'll show it to you here on the screen. This comes from our friend Connor Riley on Twitter, who said Jeff and other UGA recruiting writers after the month of June. And of course, it's the famous meme of a restaurant employee sitting outside on the bench, head down. I can only imagine that was the feeling that you had times probably a million.
Well, it's kind of like you know some of it's coming, and that's a famous name, Southern spicy chicken joint. We're following Brandon Adams' protocol about the plugs here. But I tell you, Kaylee, everybody felt like that. Probably the Georgia recruiting staff, the Georgia coaches, maybe the other schools that were competing with Georgia for some of those guys right there. And, you know, the funny thing about it, Kaylee, is there was one more after that day too. That's how crazy the month of June got. And really, guys, let's be honest. That was a flex. For the month of June to finish up. You already had 14 commitments, and to Georgia to add 2 more in the 2026 class, then to get the whole number up to 18. That was a flex. They were showing off there.
Well, now that we're here on Wednesday, I feel like we can all finally take that deep breath after the month is over. And now that you've had time to process everything and look through the numbers, I mean, has there ever been a month in the history of Georgia recruiting where they've been able to pull off 16 commits? Is this unprecedented?
Yeah, it is. Because, you know, first of all, the thing I want people to realize is it's kind of, you can't go apples to apples anymore, Kaylee, because this recruiting class is coming together with 105 guys in mind and no longer kind of like 85 guys in mind. Like, there's some commitments in this class that I kind of take a look at and I go, okay, is that an 85 guy or is that a 105 guy? And what I mean by that is we all know the house rules and the new settlement. The SEC is going to play by 85. They've kind of agreed upon it for this season. But the next season and the seasons to come, a lot of these guys are going to be walk-ons where that would have been walk-ons, would have been the PWOs, but now Georgia's kind of got to recruit to get to a 105 roster. And again, Kaylee, the fact that the only thing that comes to mind is late 2018 when this was the first year of the early signing period in December of 2018 when I think Georgia got a flurry of maybe like 10 in like the week leading up and maybe 5 or 6 on that first early signing day. I mean, guys like Channing Tindall, I'll never forget that story. I was driving back from somewhere. I pull off the side of the road and like, you know, Jamari Sawyer had already went that day and like Cade Mays had already went that day. And you're just like, yeah, they got more. And Channing told me the day of, he's like, man, I just wanted to jump on the boat because everybody else was doing it. He was planning to do his during the traditional signing period, but he just decided to go ahead and jump in there. That's about all you see, or maybe the Februarys of days gone by. But especially now, especially in this era, I think 16 in a month will probably be the new record unless Kirby goes, all right, let me just do 17 next year because he can.
So one quick question before we move on to the rest of the show. What was more impressive to you, 16 commits over the span of 1 month or 3 in one day?
Got to be 16 because you have to kind of time this together. Like I'm going to be in the camp that I truly believe that there were some guys that were ready to commit and Georgia was like, hey, how about I do it on this day? And they kind of played Connect Four a little bit around other commitments that were already scheduled, trying to line everything up like air traffic controllers. But 16 in a month is insane because Kaylee can really only happen now in June or July because you have pressure from 2 areas. The kids want to get it over with. You had this revenue share deal where some folks were trying to front load the contracts. We saw how busy Open Endorse was yesterday with like record monies being funneled from colleges to athletes now. But I think this was kind of an anomaly, like an outlier. But you're also going to realize that a lot of times now there's also pressure for these kids to get their decision done before their high school seasons. And I mean, crazy, Kaylee. School starts in Georgia, at least for my kids, on August the 1st. So like, there's not a lot of time if you want to get committed before your first game. So there's a lot of stuff there. I think the Georgia will find a way to elevate itself above this. But for right now, I think this is the new standard in elite recruiting, even for the Dogs.
So looking back on it, it truly can't be overstated what a monster month it was for the Dogs. So on today's show, we're going to do our absolute best to try to break down what happened over the last month and more importantly, how did it happen? And then with that, we'll also focus on the 5-star quarterback, Jared Curtis, who not only did you get the chance to catch up with him, but also got to watch him play on OT7. So we'll hear more from Jeff on what that looked like, and we'll hear from Jared Curtis himself. Then just when you think it's done, it's never done. Because June's over, we got to start July all over again. And even though they now have 26 commits in the class, the Dogs aren't slowing down anytime soon. And then at the end of the show, we'll do our weekly class breakdown where we not only show the offensive and defensive commits, but also talk about who are the top priorities left for the Dogs. And a lot of names came off the board in the month of June. Yeah. So this is almost a completely revised top targets list, which we will do towards the end of Before the Hedges. Let's start with this. From Durham, North Carolina, when I was there with you, to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, you have been just about everywhere watching the life-changing decisions of these young men. And to kind of put a spin on how we're going to do this today, I thought the best way to break it down was by doing some month of June superlatives.
Superlatives.
Yeah, I like it. So we'll go ahead and we'll kick it off with the first one, which is going to be the biggest or / most important commitment of June. Who would you award that to?
Yeah, so, Kaylee, it's kind of funny. Georgia got so hot during the month of June that it felt cliche to say heater or dog days of summer. So I called it Georgia is hotter than the top of a water tower in Tifton in July. You've been to Tifton, you've been to South Georgia, you know how hot it is. And I think my answer to this question, Kaylee, is basically forget about the rankings, folks, because I think my guy here, it's a guy that I think is ready to play at Georgia. I think he will come in ready to play at Georgia. That's Kamari Brooks when he committed to Georgia. That was back on day 2 of the 7-day streak. Kaylee, we were there, we were live, and there's so many good things about Kamari. Kamari is obviously a 2-time basketball state champion, a football state champion. His great uncle Horace King was one of the first 5 African-American football players at Georgia. He's got another step-grandfather that was on the 1980 national championship team. Looks like his older brother has one of the coolest Outcast shirts we could ever see in it. But just the way Kamari's wired, like here's what you learned about Kamari. He's literally 6 stoplights away from Butts-Mehre in the House of Pain. And even after he took his official visit to Georgia, he would show up on Saturdays and Sundays when other kids were in town. Like Jared Curtis told me that Kamari showed up, even when it wasn't his official visit, to just hang out with some of those other official visitors. It was really big. But Kaylee, he can play right away. He can set the edge. I mean, the benchmarks for how he can play could be anywhere from Chas Chambliss to Azeez Ojulari, maybe even better than Azeez because he's already such a very smart football player. 6'4", 230. He was an impact receiver on the state title team a year ago for North Oconee. We had him at number 1 on the top targets for a reason, and I think that guy was the biggest simply because we're going to see him walking out to the 50-yard line before some big ESPN games at prime time because that guy's a future Georgia captain.
I am very confident in saying that there couldn't have been another person for biggest commitment apart from Kamari Brooks, also because of how close he is to the University of Georgia. Came down to Georgia and Alabama. Of course, he goes to North Oconee, which is right outside of Athens. So Georgia had no excuse not to prioritize Kamari in every way possible, considering how much they could visit him and see him and talk to him and let him know that, hey, you're one of the top priorities on our list. This would have been a huge loss if they would have let Kamari go to Alabama, considering how close he is to them. But there is something I want you to elaborate on more, and that's you mentioned that he's not the highest rated commit that Georgia picked up in the month of June. So apart from the ranking, why is he the most plug and play?
I think basically, Kaylee, because he's ready to play right away. There's a maturity level. When he's playing edge for Georgia and he has all this wide receiver, tight end background, and also he has the background of being a basketball player. Like I love the story about Kamari where, we told it on DawgNation where he comes to his teammates on the school bus going to the state championship game. And he's like, you're going to see a different me today. I mean, that's what I said to Kaylee before we were hosting the primetime show today in the Brandon slot. I said, Kaylee, you're going to see a different Jeff today on our air, and while we talk about the dogs. And there's so many things about Kamari you like. The fact that he goes to his coach, and his coach is like, hold on, man, I was quite happy, quite enthused and content with the Kamari Brooks we got for the entire junior year. But then he played better than he ever did. He wrecked the game. He busted up a very good Marist football team that was state championship worthy. And the other thing, Kaylee, I got to say this is the ultimate benchmark I have now for great players, and that is, do you make everybody else around you better? Yeah, you can do your thing. Yeah, you can knock back guys. You can reset the line of scrimmage. You can go get the play. But can you make the other guys around you better by the way you work, the way you care for Georgia, the way it matters to you? That's why Kamari Brooks, I think, was the best one here.
So we got to keep it moving because we've got a few of these. This next one is best theater. And before you tell me who it is, can you explain more in depth about what you mean by best theater?
Yeah, so we call it that cinema. Like, where's the Spielberg moments? Where's the Francis Ford Coppola moments? Because we've seen them. We remember Mason Short last year. You remember Juan Gaston last year, where he played the Russian nesting dolls type thing right there, where he kept pulling off layers. And I think the best cinema it had to be from a Georgia legacy, and that was P.J. Dean, the guy who committed to Georgia. And it was a bitter fight with South Carolina to the end. Mm-hmm. That's some more of that friendly rivalry there between Coach Beamer and Coach Smart. You can kind of see that at work. But not only did he commit, he had the hats in front of him, but he reaches down under the table and he pulls out, the video here is great. He pulls out a Georgia helmet, and it is a Georgia game-worn helmet that his brother wore. Mm. And, Jared is his older brother, Jared Wilson, the guy that was a center at Georgia, and then now was a third-round draft pick. He was at the ceremony, and I thought that was, show us something you'd never seen before, right, Kaylee? Wow us, enthuse us, and I thought that's what P.J. Dean did right there.
So we've talked a lot about how the 16 commits in the month of June made history, but also looking at the history of this class, now that you've got P.J. Dean, who's the brother of Jared Wilson, you also have the brothers Nnamdi and Ekene Ogboko, and then also in the 2026 class, you have Carter Lucky, who's the brother of Lawson Lucky. I mean, has there ever been a time where there's been this much brotherly love in a class?
No, I mean, it's kind of like Kirby, with the way he recruits now. They're going to be like, hey, I'm actually recruiting you and your younger brother at the same time. Because the funny thing with all these three names is they were there on their official visits for the older brother, or they were there in all the game action for their older brother coming to Georgia for scrimmages. They know exactly the way the program's wired, the DNA of the program. So this is kind of unprecedented times where you're going to have guys that already know the Georgia way family, know the Georgia system, and they also kind of going to have older brothers saying, hey, man, there be no slack in here, man. You can't let my team down.
This next superlative honestly needs no explanation, because from the moment that we saw it, we knew that it was going to be really hard to top. That's the best moment, and it comes from Jay Lamar. I mean, we've talked about it on every show we've done since then.
Probably
emotional, actual tears. You could feel everyone in that room know that this was a young man who this was truly a life-changing decision for him. It was so emotional. I was emotional. You were emotional. I don't know if there's going to be any moment in the future that's ever going to top what we experienced at Colquitt County with Jay Lamar.
Kaylee, it's never happened before. I've been to probably 100 of these things, probably 100 more. I'm going to watch it every time it shows up on my timeline. It's not only a young man breaking down and showing real tears at his commitment ceremony, but you got to know the backstory here. And the backstory here is Jay Lamar, troubled kid. He even admits it. He's told me several times, God makes no mistakes, Kaylee. He was messing up his life, destroying his future freshman and sophomore year. He was getting in a lot of fights. He was in school suspension. He was at the alternative school there at Colquitt County, but then he figured it out. I call it the grow-up pill moment. The young man swallowed the grow-up pill, and he figured out that, hey, I've still got a chance here. And for what he's done in his life, the change of direction in Jay Lamar's life, that just kind of hit him. And again, Kaylee, we could even say this for a lot of other things. Not only did Colquitt County put on a great show for their first really ever commitment ceremony like this, but Jay Lamar came out in all red, and he had Georgia rubber bands everywhere. He's like, I'm not fronting. I'm not hiding
Yes.
He's like, I'm a dog, and I don't care who knows it.
That's what I was going to say, too, because, I mean, compared to the last one, the theatrics are great. At this point, we've seen just about anything, but this one was so different in the sense that there was no theatrics to it. He didn't even have at first, he didn't even start picking up the hats. He just stood up and opened it up, and you would think that as the top running back in the state of Georgia, there would be a little bit more that came with it, but it was just strictly raw, real emotion.
Wore red and black T-shirt right there.
Red and black edible cake.
Yeah, you look at it. Look at there. They're all the red and white are right there. The wristbands, the rubber bands he has on his self right there. He's like, he didn't want to hide it. That was kind of a coronation day more than anything, a celebration day that he got to be a dog. And then he talked about something we'll get into later in the show. He's had daily contact with Derek Cooper. Those guys talk every day about life, about ball, about their careers. There seems to be a genuine bond there formed between those two, and you see the family members there. Kaylee, there were probably, what do you want to say, maybe 50 T-shirts there that were all wearing that Jay Lamar T-shirt, family members and friends and loved ones in support of him that day. So that's one of those, Kaylee, that I'm not even going to think about the miles it was to get down to Moultrie.
It wasn't that many.
To get us there, because that was worth the trip by far.
All right, let's talk about the next one, which is the biggest flex. We're going to award this to one of Georgia's newest commits, defensive lineman, Preston Carey, who let everyone know that his commitment ceremony on Monday night pulled over 12,000 people. DawgNation couldn't be on the scene for it, but somebody else was able to capture it. And honestly, look at everybody in their suits. Like, he's very well known for always wearing suits to his official visit. So that in itself is enough to get the biggest flex award.
Well, first of all, if Preston Carey flexed himself, that might be one of the bigger flexes in the class. But here's how we give it to this. Number one is he said that he's ready to run through a brick wall after he named that. Kaylee, Preston emailed me when he was in the 8th grade, and he was like, basically sent out an email. He was 6'4", 250 at the time, already a big dude. And he was like, what do I got to do to get to Georgia? How do I get noticed by the coaches? And he had his information. He had his highlights. He had the names of his coaches, his character references. This would become the same man. And you know this is a Georgia guy when he goes, you know, kind of how you do anything is how you do everything. This was the guy that shows up at all of his official visits in a tuxedo.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know, you think about it, Kaylee, it's kind of lost on a lot of young people, but that is a job interview for them with the University of Georgia. He's wearing a tux. Of course, he got it all parlayed into a nice name, image, and likeness deal as well. But the other thing about this I really like, Kaylee, is you know, Georgia. Most people thought Georgia was done after they got P.J. Dean earlier that day. Because Georgia's, as you guys will see on Top Targets, Georgia's defensive line room is very, very full. Florida really wanted this guy. Most people maybe thought Florida was going to take him. And this was a guy that kind of bet on himself. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to be a dog. I'm going to go to where it's the hardest place in the world to play, that it's going to be tough. And that's where the best are. And if I want to be the best, I want to play among the best. He doesn't care that there's going to be 4, 5, 6, 7 other defensive linemen in this class. This is a guy, Kaylee, that will be a run stuffer on first and second down. He's about 6'5". He's about 300 pounds right now. And he wanted to be a part of this. It didn't take a lot of NIL. It didn't take a lot of last-minute recruiting. He was sold on Travion Scott from the jump. Even when he was in the 8th and 9th grade, he wanted to be in the best place it was to train football players.
So to round out our superlatives, the last one is going to be the best soundbite. And look, we got a lot of great sound from guys this month talking about the relationships with their recruiters, winning national championships, guys already shutting down their recruitments. But there was one that stood out above the rest, and that belonged to defensive lineman James Johnson.
What type of player are the Dogs going to get? They're going to see 52. What's that guy going to be like on the field in Athens?
He's going to be a great dog, dominant, better than Jalen Carter.
Throwing that out there, huh?
I'm throwing it out there now.
Jalen Carter, huh?
Jalen Carter.
That's like having 400 pounds on the bar to bench that, man. You know how tough that is, right?
Oh, yeah.
Why can you be the next Jalen Carter or the first James Johnson in Athens?
I'm just explosive off the ball. The film says it all. I'm dominant. I'm fast, too. And, I'm very agile and versatile. So that's what I could be better than Jalen Carter.
Here's the thing. Not only did he say it, he doubled down on it.
I asked him, I said, hey, man, I know you're probably caught in the moment. Are you sure about this? He was very sure about this. And, you know, I know folks will sit there. There's two camps on this, Kaylee. They're going to be like, I love the confidence. I want a player that feels like that, kind of like in Maverick or Top Gun. You like that in the fighter pilot, right? There's that camp. And then there's the other camp of like, goodness gracious. Jalen Carter was walking back juniors in his first practices at Georgia. And then he did the thing with Jaden Daniels. Well, surely all this, the bar is set very high, but at least one service ranks him as the #1 defensive tackle in the country right now. And you got an elite DT making that sort of comment right there. I mean, Kaylee, the first play on his tape, he literally walks the guy back into the quarterback, chases him around, comes around and gets a half sack with a tandem teammate right there. I'm going to say kudos to James Johnson because that guy is active.
You know what? Knowing Jalen Carter, though, and his personality, I feel like he would be in support of this. Like, you know what? Okay, put the pressure on yourself and live up to it.
He'd probably be like, come see me in Philly. Come see me in Philly. We got room for you.
All right, so coming up, we will catch up with the 5-star quarterback, Jared Curtis, and discuss where do the Dogs go next after this historic month. But first, we want to remind you that here on Before the Hedges, we are brought to you by Kroger. Not only are they with us every single week, but also all of the commitment specials that we've been able to bring to you over the month of June wouldn't be possible without Kroger. And as 4th of July is coming up this Friday, of course, 4th of July brings the 4th of July barbecue. It's one of the things that I most look forward to is hot dogs, hamburgers, fruit platters, cake. So when you are grabbing all of your stuff that you need for the 4th of July, think about our friends at Kroger. And to make it even easier on yourself, in order to use that Kroger delivery, sign up for Kroger Boost. You can do it by going to kroger.com/boost. You can try free now for 30 days. Save up to $1,000 per year with 2 times the fuel points and that grocery delivery. That's just going to make your everyday life easier. Let's shift our focus. Not only has the Dogs recruiting team been working overtime in the month of June, I think we could also rope Jared Curtis into that category. He's been earning his keep on and off the field. We'll start with the off the field stuff because when we went and visited him for his commitment in Nashville, he made it very clear that as soon as that happened, he was going to go grab the guys that he wanted. And I think Brandon called it the Pied Piper. He went straight into that Pied Piper role.
Yeah, that's something you want your quarterback to do. They're class builders. They're class anchors. I kind of remember when we first started covering quarterbacks at Georgia here, we were like, is Bailey Hockman way back when out of McEacher and a Pied Piper?
Oh, my God. I just totally forgot about that. Was like, wow.
Long time ago. And it was like we brought up Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm was also one of the best. But here's what I like about Jared Curtis. And this is kind of some maybe new spill we hadn't talked about yet. It was kind of like Kaylee, he had his moment. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And he had his 2 commitments. He had his ceremony. And then everything else wasn't about him. I was told he didn't take a lot of pictures at his official visit. He kind of more focused on taking pictures with the other guys, talking to the other guys. Sure, he took a few because every recruit comes out an official visit photo shoot with about 400 images or at least 400 poses. But he made the moment about my time and my turn is past. It's time for me to work on some dudes. And you like the way he's been going about it because, Kaylee, some people can put a message on an Instagram post, hey, come join us. Or they can tweet out some things, and it looks like they're recruiting, but really they're not. I mean, it can look like that's what we call faux recruiting a little bit. But what Jared has been doing, download text messages with a lot of key personnel in this class, I think that's what's been really impressive.
So when we caught up with the 4-star edge Kamari Brooks last Monday, we asked him about the role that he would play as a recruiter in the rest of the 2026 class. And in his answer, he also threw out some names that were responsible for reaching out to him.
Anybody let me know that they think that we could get, I'm going to definitely start hitting them up. You know, Jared Curtis, he kind of helped me out. He been texting me, you know, like I said, I know a lot of their players. So C.J. Wiley been texting, C.J. Allen, Ethan Barber, you know, Landon. So those guys kind of recruited me throughout my process. So I feel like I'm going to definitely be a big recruiter in this class because we want to bring in the best class we possibly can.
So here's why I love this. I would imagine that as a quarterback, the first people that you would reach out to are skill players. Let me go get a running back. Let me go get some offensive linemen, guys who can catch the ball. I like that he went for a defensive kind of guy.
I think what he's doing, Kaylee, is he's finding his mirror guy on the other side of the ball. I call them defensive quarterbacks. That would be a guy like Kamari, even though he plays in the edge. Tyler Atkinson will be another guy. The guys that are going to lead that unit, lead that room, you can just picture it. Future Georgia football practices to come. The defense might be stunting, might be stopping Curtis in the offense, and they're going to be jawing a little bit, saying, "Hey, Jared, you got any plays today? You going to make any first downs? You going to get any tutties on us?" And then when Jared makes a play, he's going to clap back right at him. I mean, that's what he's looking for. He's looking for players that will make him better, players that might make him look bad, because he knows if they're making other Georgia players look bad on the practice field, they're really going to make other SEC opponents look bad in the real game environments.
So last weekend you had the chance to talk to and watch Jared Curtis at the OT7 camp,
Right.
and we're going to play an interview from him. But before we do that, is there anything in particular that DawgNation should pay attention to?
Well, I think he mentions a couple of names that's who he's working on. We actually talked to him, I believe, maybe hours before Malachi Lee made his decision, and that was the guy. We could have a pretty short show, Kaylee. If we discussed everybody Georgia missed in the month of June, it might go like 10 to 12 minutes. But Malachi was one of the misses. But you could see what he was working on. He was working on guys that were going to protect the offense, guys that were going to protect him, guys that were very important big targets to the class.
Well, with that, I say we go ahead and catch up with what I'm calling the silent killer of GM, Jared Curtis.
Jared, I was in Athens on Monday. Kamari Brooks brought your name up. He said, like, what you said meant something. Have you been, like, slyly being, like, the assassin in this class, man, trying to figure this out?
Trying to a little bit, just telling them what I thought through the process, what really mattered big to me, and hopefully, they listen to it, take it to heart, and make the right move.
What was your impression of that guy, getting to know him a little bit?
I talked to him a little bit down there on my visit. He came by. He already took his OB, so he just came by and hang out. And, just getting to talk to him. He's a really good guy, and I'm excited to play with him.
Dandridge today. How'd you feel about that guy? Did you talk to him? Did you say I want to play with you? You got another receiver today.
I talked to Craig a little bit when I was up there on my OV too, and he was up there just hanging out, and talked to him. I talked to him a little bit more, and I'm glad we got him too.
How do you feel? Like, it seems like so long ago when you committed, and now you got one every day. It might go on for like 8-9 days, man. What's it like watching that, being a part of the class and Bill?
It's exciting. Seeing what we got. Hopefully we land a couple more, but I'm excited, and hopefully 2 or 3.
Who do you want? Who are you talking to? Who are you working on?
Tyler. Yep, he needs to come. Malachi Lee, Brett Collier, a bunch of them guys like that.
What would Tyler mean, man? Like, that's kind of the counterpart of you on the other side of the ball, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That'd be a big get for us, and I feel like we have a chance, but you never know. But I'm excited. I'm excited for that. I think my mom said he saw him, so I'm trying to talk to him.
You're full go now. Your coach said you were going to be full go right around the first of this month, right?
First of
July. So you're going to try it out, right?
Yes,
What do you got? You worked out earlier today. What do you think you got in the arm right now?
I feel good. Just a little toss around today, so hopefully I come out tomorrow and we can win it.
You can cut it loose, or what are you going to do? Can you?
I'm going full go, for sure.
Jared, what's your message to all these guys that still might choose Georgia or still get a chance to talk to them, man? What are you going to tell them?
Commit to the G. Let's do it.
Has Hollister reached out to you for any sales on that shirt yet?
Oh, they haven't. They haven't, actually. Hollister hit me up.
Yeah, I mean, like, people were buying that thing, man. I've seen so many dog fans, and they're like, hey, I got one.
Yeah.
Jared, does it feel good to be over? Does it feel good to be done? Like, this is the right decision for you in so many ways, it sounds like, right?
Yes, sir, for sure. It's a lot of stuff lifted off my shoulders before senior season, so, I'm excited to get back down there. I'm not sure where I'm going back down, actually, but they got some of the guys down there and get it rolling.
Was there one of these commitments that got you really excited?
Let's see. I was excited for Craig, Kamari Brooks.
Brady?
I text all of them. Brady, Marchi, yeah, I text every single one of them. I text. We have a big group chat. Text them individually, and I'm excited to work with them.
Last one for you, Jared. I know you think this way, but you look around and see every commitment and think, these are the guys I could win a championship with. These are the guys I want to win a championship with.
For sure. You know, just gotta keep our heads down and work every day, and we'll get it done for sure.
So we aren't going to mention the brand that you named because we don't do that, but I do want to say that is a humongous missed opportunity on their part.
Yeah.
But in catching up with Jared over the weekend, seeing him play in the OT7, what was your overall assessment of him?
Couple things, couple bullet points. Number one, Kaylee, bigger. He looks like he's very thick, probably 6'4", 230. Looks like he's had a few biscuits. Big strapping guy, going to be hard to get on the ground. Second thing is there was a lot of rust because he was coming back a little bit early. I remember when we were down up there in Nashville, when he made his commitment, he was kind of going to be sidelined with his shoulder and his back until like the 1st of July. Like he was going to come back gunning after the July 4th weekend with his high school team. So it looks like they pushed things up a little bit. Very rusty. He started out. His first game wasn't really that good. Now his second game was really good. That was the one that they went into overtime and then lost in overtime. His RWE, which is Rod Wave Elite Team. Yeah, that is the rapper sponsoring 7-on-7.
I thought that was like a stat I'd never heard of.
No, RWE, there's a new one. But so they didn't get a win over the weekend in OT7. They didn't make the playoffs, but you saw the big arm. You saw him make a lot of big plays. You saw Jared just kind of look the part of the nation's #1 quarterback, especially with some dimes he threw. Some of them were so good, I wanted to call them maybe, a quarter because the dime looked that good and it was such a big throw. But fitted into some tight spots, darted up a bunch of plays, really impressed a lot of guys. The other thing, Kaylee, is he got to play with Lincoln Keys, Georgia's tight end commitment. Lincoln kind of barnstormed his way down there, got to play with Jared for a couple of series and everything else. So you got to see a future Georgia big play connection there.
So still left to go here on Before the Hedges. We'll talk about what's next for the Dogs on the recruiting trail and list out Georgia's top targets that are still left for the 2026 class, which at this point is not many. And also later, we will still do the R.S. Andrews live cool down. So if you have any sort of recruiting questions for Jeff, and even myself, you can go ahead and start getting those in the comments now. Have you ever heard that saying rent-free, Jeff, where things occupy your mind space for free? That's how I feel about Perfect Day at Coco K. I find myself thinking about it a lot, and then whenever we get off a DawgNation cruise, I find myself telling every person that I know about Perfect Day. I mean, it's worth it to go on a Royal Caribbean ship alone just to visit Royal Caribbean's private island, which is actually voted best private island by Travel Weekly for the last 4 years. It's got something for everyone, whether you want to go with your family and enjoy the water park with that slide that, like Jared Curtis, is much bigger in person. And then if you want to be on the adult only side, they offer 2 different options for that. Now they're actually expanding on the island too. I feel like when we went back, there was already more to it. It really is just the perfect day of a vacation, and I could spend the entire time there. But really if you haven't had the opportunity to visit Perfect Day Coco K and you want to, Jessica Slater is a great travel agent assigned specifically to DawgNation, and she can help you get set up with your dream Royal Caribbean cruise. You can contact her by reaching her at 770-718-9147 or email her at jslater@dreamvacations.com. So it's crazy to even think that with 26 commits in the class that there's still room for more. Yeah. So we're going to go over some upcoming commitments that could potentially add to the class of 2026. We're going to start with the 4-star tight end Braden Fogel, who's going to commit July 4th on Friday. So he's a 6'3" tight end out of Mansfield, Ohio, a top 200 recruit. Is this Georgia's last chance to get a tight end that's not Caden Prothro, who we'll talk about in a second?
Yeah, I think, he's a pure tight end. The variance there with Caden is he really kind of feels like right now he's going to start out at Georgia as perhaps an X or a hybrid. It's all going to depend on his weight. And I think Georgia has given him that plan. The Prothro family is really good with that plan. But Braden Fogel, actually pretty cool. He's on vacation this week. And he's going to make his commitment while he's on vacation. I believe he's in Myrtle Beach South Carolina. And he's from Ohio. That's Big Ten country, not too far from Columbus. But those are the final three. And Kaylee, he fits the profile of what the Dogs want. He's a former basketball player, has camped with Georgia a lot, really athletic, big wingspan, playmaker. And he's the guy that, Georgia wants, that athlete type at tight end. Fogel's one of those guys I think that really looks pretty promising in terms of with what Georgia usually tries to find. Now, there's also the worry, are they going to have room? What are the spots going to look like? But I think with Georgia and Fogel, the Dogs are a clear contender there for that young man.
We mentioned the 5-star tight end Caden Prothro, who's going to make his decision next Saturday, July 12th. We'll have some more information about that at the end of these slides. A lot of crystal ball predictions have him going to Georgia. I mean, is this locked down?
I would say that looking at the two finalists, there's really two options. There's Georgia or Texas. Is Texas going to, basically pull together some of the money that they had for Mark Bowman, not Baby Brock, for Mark Bowman, and then is they going to make a run at Caden Prothro? But as we've known with talking to the Prothro family, they're going to have a lot more going for them rather than just a big check and a big billfold right there. So I've always felt like Caden would eventually take a look around, field some offers, wait to be absolutely floored by another school, and then that one would go to head-to-head with Georgia. I don't know if that one has happened. I think Caden's going to benefit by watching how Georgia uses Noah Thomas a lot this year. Similar kind of body frame, body type right there. And I think Caden's possibilities with Georgia have always been strong. Kaylee, this is another guy. He's a 3-time high school state champion at Bowden. There's a lot of loyalty there because he's never transferred, even when a lot of folks tried to get him to transfer away from maybe even just 10 or 15 miles away from Bowden to another powerhouse school. So, there's a lot of qualities there about Caden Prothro that seem like an ideal dog.
Also on Saturday the 12th, the safety Tyreek Green out of Buford will also make his commitment. And it's funny to think that, I mean, even just 2 years ago, you would hear safety out of Buford and you'd be like, not happening. And then KJ Bolden happened, and now it's like, wow, Georgia really does have a chance. It's between UGA and several others. When it comes to Tyreek Green, we've got him here as an athlete, primarily in that safety role, but is a more versatile guy. But there's also 3 safeties already in the 2026 class. Is Tyreek Green a want or a need?
I think he's a need because this is one that the head coach has been recruiting for a while. There's some guys in the class when you learn that, okay, Kirby Smart's personally involved in this recruitment. That means a lot. And a lot of times those players turn out to be great players at Georgia because Kirby believes in them. But I'll never forget, this is the most insightful thing I can say about Tyreek Green is his head coach. Brian Appling at Buford told me that he could be Justice Haynes. He's kind of like Justice Haynes running the ball. And then he's a little bit like KJ Bolden or Caleb Downs as his safety. So that's very impressive there.
So the last name on that slide for an upcoming decision is the 4-star linebacker, Nick Abrams, who will commit. It's going to be a Wednesday, July 16th. The thing about the Nick Abrams commitment that I'm most curious about is on the next page, we'll talk about Tyler Atkinson, who has not set a date. How does the Nick Abrams decision affect what will potentially happen with Tyler Atkinson or vice versa?
Nick is a prototype NFL linebacker. He's got the length. He's got everything. Really impressive young man to talk to and try to report his story. Feels like Michigan and Alabama have at times had as good a chance as Georgia. So this is a very contested recruitment. I would think, Kaylee, it might show some dominoes. Like, let's say Georgia wins that recruitment. All of a sudden, Tyler Atkinson's decision. Wow, that's a lot more interesting. That this Georgia going to kind of focus on a pair of NFL-ish linebacker, first-round projectionable type guys in this class. So I think this one won't go the Dogs' way because I think Georgia and Tyler Atkinson, those two, they're connected, they're linked, they've always been. But listen, if Nick Abrams said, I want to come to Georgia, the Dogs would definitely not turn him down. But that is one to really watch. Big fan of his game. He is going to be one of those first rounders, one of those All-American types in my mind for sure.
So on the next page that we have here for you, we've got some guys that haven't announced but will be coming up pretty quickly. We mentioned the 5-star linebacker Tyler Atkinson, who it's down to Clemson, Georgia, Oregon, and Texas. You've also got the 4-star defensive lineman Valdon Sohn, who we'll talk more about when we get to our top targets here in just a minute. Let's go to Derek Cooper, the 5-star athlete who would more than likely be a running back for Georgia. He was initially scheduled to commit July 12th and then put out on his social media that he was going to delay his commitment. We don't have an official date yet. Was the pushing back of his commitment good or bad for Georgia?
I think it was bad for Georgia because that means he's not ready to commit yet. I think that means he's going to still do some more looking because, Kaylee, this is a guy that we'll have a story of him that goes up on DawgNation.com today. We're allowed to plug our own material, thankfully, in this space. But Derek, to me, seemed like a guy that was just ready for it to be over with, and he was almost like, okay, I got the 12th. Good. Now I know I'll make up my mind by then. I'll have to make up my mind by then. It was kind of forcing himself to make a decision. And he told me it was like every other day, back and forth. This school, that school, this school, that school. I think one of the days at the OT7 when I saw him, he was in Texas gear. I believe the next day he might have been in Miami or Ohio State gear or something else like that. So I think Derek's going to be very interesting. Of course, we must trace back to he initially committed to Georgia for a few hours. Last summer when he was committed to Georgia, right around the same time of year. So
when mom was asleep.
When mom was asleep. That's literally the story. He committed while mom was asleep, and his mom woke up and she's like, "Oh, no, you didn't commit. Let's walk this thing back right now." Georgia has definitely prioritized him. I think Kaylee gets really interesting for Georgia at running back. If they don't get Derek Cooper, they'll have to probably flip somebody in state to fill out that class right there, especially. Kind of shows you how important Jay Lamar was, getting him earlier last month in terms of how much that means. But I think Georgia is always going to be a down to the wire school, and I think he's going to have a lot of hurricanes in his ears, so that'll be something to watch for sure. I do anticipate, Kaylee, that the decision will come this month. Maybe he just won't set a certain date this time.
So before we get to our 2026 class breakdown, pretty sure I have the green light. I'm just going to go ahead and do it and announce that DawgNation will be on the scene for the Caden Pro Throw decision that will take place Saturday, July 12th. And if you want to get a notification that DawgNation's going to be there the moment we go live, you can subscribe to our DawgNation YouTube page. Not only will it notify you anytime that we go live for a commitment ceremony, but also any of our shows, not just DawgNation Daily, but also Before the Hedges, DawgNation at Large with Connor and myself, which we will do a special edition of tomorrow, but also On the Beat. And while you're here, go ahead and give us a like on our special edition of DawgNation Daily Before the Hedges. I haven't found a way to combine the two yet.
Kaylee, one thing, I'll maybe call an audible right here. I want to call back that slide with the remaining commitments, the TBDs with Cooper, Atkinson, and Valdon Sohn. So here's the thinking, Kaylee. We have to talk as much as possible about Valdon. Valdon is a guy that I feel could be one of the greatest defensive linemen Georgia has signed in the last 4 or 5 years. The fact that Georgia could pair him up with Elijah Griffin in a future defense should be tantalizing to Dog fans. I have been led to believe that there is no recruit in the entire class Georgia wants more right now than Valdon Sohn. And that's how important he is to the Dogs going forward.
You'll see how important Jeff feels that he is when we get to our top targets here on our class breakdown. And if you are not someone that typically joins us on Wednesday night for Before the Hedges, we do this each and every week to keep you updated on where things stand with the class of 2026, as well as update you on who are the next priority targets for the class. We always start with the offensive side of the ball, which when we were doing this before the month of June, we were actually discussing how we thought this was going to be an offensive-heavy class. And then when we go to the defensive side here in just a moment, you'll see that that is not the case. But there's two things I want to ask you about. One of them is the 4-star wide receiver, Craig Dandridge, who committed last week. I mean, one of the fastest rising 4-star receivers in the state of Georgia. Can you just elaborate on what he really brings to the table? Like, what separates him from the other two?
I think really it's kind of body control and how smooth he is, Kaylee. I know lots of people on the feeds, they love it when we speak in player parallels, where it's not kind of comparing him to a player, but this is what his skill set looks like when you see him on the grass. I think Craig Dandridge will remind folks a lot of Terrence Edwards. Really smooth, really technical guy with some speed, playmaking ability, good size. I think Terrence Edwards, I'll tell you one thing, I was talking to a former Georgia Bulldog. This will be a story later on DawgNation.com. And he gave me a comparison for Craig Dandridge. And folks, you guys are going to love this. They said he's a cross between Reggie Brown and Terrence Edwards. Yeah, you guys educate everybody in the chat feed if they don't know who Reggie Brown was, along with Terrence Edwards, because that's something. Kaylee, one other note here about the breakdown. I think Georgia stays at 3 wide receivers in this class. I know Cedarian Morgan is committing today as well, the 5-star out of Alabama. Don't expect him to choose the Dogs. Now, that would be a whopper of a flex on the recruiting trail as well. But you got to remember, when you look at this board, there's going to be – Georgia, I think, will sit at 3 receivers simply because they know Caden Prothro can give you a little bit of both at wide receiver and also at the tight end spot.
Well, where can Georgia add in the offense?
They're going to add a running back, hopefully. They have to add a running back. Obviously, Derek Cooper would be the ideal. So would Savion Hyder. He would be another ideal guy. If not, they're going to have to go and take a look at other options, flipping some in-state guys. I know Latimer at Sandy Creek's a guy that Georgia is going to probably come back and take another look at. Will Rajecki, another guy at Sequoia High School, is another guy. The one name to think about here, Kaylee, and I don't know if confidence is waning on him, but it's Breck Colajay down at IMG Academy. It's Michigan, it's Miami, and it's Georgia for Colajay. Dogs would love to have him. I think Colajay might be the second best lineman in this class on the offensive side should he choose the Dogs. But that one is a very contested recruitment right now, and there's also no timeline given right now for Breck Colajay as well.
So let's flip to the defensive side of the ball, and you'll notice that one of these things is not like the other. I had to basically make the defensive line group a triple XL.
Like that.
Well, so now we went from 2 to 6. Do they keep all 6 defensive linemen in this class?
Interesting, Kaylee. That's probably the power question right here, because a lot of these guys, I think South Carolina will still try to flip P.J. Dean. Miami and Texas will still try to flip James Johnson. I think Corey Howard is a guy, big Corey out of Valdosta. Corey's a guy that I think his stock will go up as a senior, and that might draw a little bit more attention from other schools, that maybe the ones that miss on all these big-time defensive linemen. That having been said, Kaylee, they could probably add at least one more in Valden to this defensive line group. And if you look right here, this is the good variance here in the breakdown here. You know, Fitzpatrick, Harris, Calicut, Kaylee, we've had him as a DB because he can do a lot, but Georgia's recruiting him purely to play corner, although he can do so much. I'm kind of torn about where to put him because Chase has been told by the Georgia staff that we're going to play in a lot of places because he's 6'3", 195, can cover, can come up, be physical, and hit. I mean, he was in the 8th grade knocking kids' shoes off. There's videotape on YouTube about that. You have a lot of players here, Kaylee. We must hit this button every time we can. The 2 players that it will be our sole mission to raise awareness on these guys. They're the most overlooked players in this class. Number 1 is Jordan Smith. I think when all the lists are done, I think he will be one of the top 6 players in this class, and then Justice Fitzpatrick as well. We don't talk about those guys enough. we talk about who's coming down the track next or who just committed. Those guys will be special football players at the University of Georgia.
And one thing that we don't do here on Before the Hedges is skip over the special teams because it is just as important. So we've got 2 guys on the special teams, which is going to be the kicker, Wade Register, and the punter. And it's not typical for punters or any special team members to have a star by them. So they also have the 3-star Heron Zerakat. Then we'll move to our class snapshot, which is kind of big picture, what 2026 means. So 26 commits in the class of 2026. That's an easy way to remember it. 10 on the offense, 14 defense, 2 special teams members. The most important thing, though, is when we started the month of June, Georgia ranked outside of the top 10 for the national class rank, and now they're at number 2, and they're only a couple of points behind USC. I mean, at one point when it was Texas or Notre Dame at the number 2, they were still at least 10 points behind, if not more, and now Georgia's within that 3.4 point range behind USC, and they have the opportunity to make that jump if they want to.
Kaylee, I'm going to call myself out on here. We had a show probably a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, when I didn't think Georgia's class would be as big as it is right now. I wasn't expecting them to take 2 specialists on scholarship, but I think that's another discipline there where Georgia is recruiting for the 105 there. I kind of thought the class size would stick around 25, but it looks to me like Georgia's expecting 2 things to happen. Number one, there's going to be a lot of attrition after this season. That might be guys flying into the portal. And number 2, that will be guys going on to the NFL. Because, Kaylee, we say this on the show a lot. One of the things when we run our numbers is we look at and we're like, where are the slots going to come from? And so much of this team, like Kaylee, 60-70% of this team are all first-year, second-year players where Georgia is still invested in. They still realize that they're developing them because they can play. They can get in that 2 deep. So I'll admit I didn't think this class was going to be this big. Now I think it's going to beef up to probably at least 5 more guys in this class, counting attrition one way or the other. So that's one of the bigger storylines to watch now is how can Georgia play defense on this class.
So who are the guys that can fill the rest of this class? Well, hopefully we'll be able to answer that with the final top targets list. A lot of names came off. We've got 11 names on the board for you today. You've got 2 edges, both 3-stars. One is Gustav Henriks out of Stockholm, Sweden. Then you've got the 3-star edge, Anthony Lunnan Jr. Out of those 2 edges, who is Georgia more likely to pull?
More likely Lunnan, but I think Tech's going to make a huge pull, a huge run at Lunnan right here, and it might mean the PPI guy who's in the same organization as Valdenson. The Dogs would make a real big run at him because he wowed everybody at their camp. And Kaylee, we must make mention here that this is Kaylee looking through the couch cushions to find enough top targets to fill up this list. There are no just off the list. These are the only 11 remaining names we can see right now joining the University of Georgia's class.
So we'll move on to our next page of top targets. You've got Nick Abrams at the 8, Brett Colliget at 7, Braden Fogel at 6, Tyreek Green at 5. I'm going to put the pressure on. If Georgia can only get 1 guy on this list, who would you want it to be?
Wow. If we're talking purely for my football team, I'd probably say Tyreek Green because he can help a lot. But then you got to sit there and you got to go, well, what does this class still need? Because there's a lot of great players that Georgia has stacked the back end of the defense with. I'd say Colliget. I'd feel good about it because they need those big uglies up front. And I think that's a piece that if you can only get one of those guys, I think it would be Colliget. But the thing is, Kirby Smart doesn't act like that way at all. I think Kirby Smart's going to get at least 2 or 3 of these names right here.
All right, so then we've got our top 4. Kamari Brooks was the number 1 for several weeks. Now it goes back to Tyler Atkinson. Does Tyler Atkinson stay there until the decision is made?
It's really close. Kaylee, you would have gotten mad at me if I would have said 1A and 1B. But I think Valden is that talented, but I also think Tyler Atkinson is going to be a 2-year all-conference and is going to be an All-American, even if he went to Furman or Appalachian State. No offense to fans of those fan base, but I think he can get it done at any school right there. Tyler is a very special football player. He's being recruited by all these schools as a defensive quarterback, one of the best linebackers the state of Georgia has ever seen. Kaylee, I would imagine most people, who would you think if we ran a poll, most wanted remaining member of the class? Do you think most people would pick Atkinson?
I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. I mean, most people might look at running back, though, and they sit there and they say, well, can we get Savion Hyder or can Georgia get a Derek Cooper? That's another big need. But Atkinson is surely a guy that would make the Dogs better, would play right away.
So that's going to wrap up our top targets. And, of course, in just a moment, I promise we'll do the R.S. Andrews cool down. But based on any of the conversations that we had today, whether it was what happened, what's next, something about Jared Curtis, do you have any final thoughts?
Valden Sone is out of Sweden. He's currently in Sweden for a month. He's not practicing with his high school team currently. They call him the big ticket. Expectations are the big ticket will commit sometime in the next week to 10 days, if not earlier.
All right. So with that, DawgNation, thank you so much for trusting in myself and Jeff today to take over DawgNation Daily. Also, shout out to Brandon for trusting us enough to do this show. It'll be myself and Connor Riley tomorrow morning, so we will look forward to seeing you then.
So Georgia, who won't pick it? I love the family atmosphere and the way they handle business.
And time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. So I am going to go ahead and start pulling up comments. I've got a way that I can look at everybody's at one time, which is honestly fantastic. So let me get that going. All right, let's go to DawgNation.com first. Jeff, before we start reading into comments, like, what's the feeling of this month being over? Is it relief? Is it excitement? Is it, oh my gosh, what just happened?
No, it's none of that. It's like, what's next? It's like, yeah, it would be one thing if we just finished the month of June and Derek Cooper had decided and Tyler Atkinson had decided and Valden Sone had decided. But those are still very big fish out there. Dogs still looking for it. I believe the Cedarian Morgan commitment is happening at noon today. He's expected to choose Alabama or Auburn with one of those two decisions right there. But that's a 5-star receiver that, you know, we don't really feel the Dogs are much more than a hat on the table with that one right now. But we were having this conversation, and I know this is not a fun topic for you to think about, but let me just kind of, this is the perspective I want you to have with this class. These freshmen in this class, these players in this class, surely there's a bunch of guys here that will be 3 and out and go to the NFL, and that would be 2026, 2027, 2028. Some of these guys, most of these guys, a lot of these guys will be around after a redshirt 2029, 2030. These guys might be part of one of the very last teams for Kirby Smart at Georgia. And I'm not meaning that in a negative spin. I'm meaning that these are going to be kind of anchors and pillars of one of the last great Georgia teams under Kirby Smart. I would be surprised if Kirby's coaching in 2031, maybe 2030, 2029. That's not just filler in the midst of the cool down to get everybody revved up. But if you want to know how Kirby's going to have his last few teams at Georgia, these are going to be some great ones.
So this one comes from Frank Patterson on YouTube, and I'm actually glad that you bring this up because it is something that we wanted to touch on today. What's the latest with the running back Savion Hyder? I feel like him and Georgia were heavily connected for a while, then maybe we're not hearing as much about the two. So what's the update on the 5-star running back?
Yeah, Hyder is definitely an NIL recruitment, and it's going to be Michigan. It seems like they've got the war chest. Tennessee, actually, if you poll a lot of reporters across the country, Tennessee seems like the team that's going to win that recruitment. Interesting there because they'll be able to pair up Faison Brandon, who some see as the number 1 quarterback, instead of Jared Curtis in this class, with Hyder. Kaylee, if we're just picking anybody you could add to the class, it might be Hyder, because I think he can have kind of like a Saquon Barkley type impact to take a very good team to a championship level team. He's that special. But hey, the way this class is put together, the Dogs are going to be just fine if they don't have the nation's number 1 running back.
I might put you in a tough position here, but that's what I'm here for, to ask the tough questions. So this comes from Doug Rayburn on Facebook. He said that he was arguing with an Alabama fan as to who was better, Tyler Atkinson or Xavier Griffin, the 5-star linebacker who recently committed to Alabama, initially was committed to USC. Who do you think is better?
It's Tyler. Not even close.
Why?
Griffin is an example. Like, Griffin's probably going to be a first-round draft pick, but we're talking about who's the better player right now. I think I think Tyler Atkinson, sophomore year, he had 197 tackles. I don't even think Xavier Griffin will have that many career tackles at Gainesville. Of course, he was hurt last year. Folks, he is a really great player, but likely first rounder, deserving 5-star, all that. But like when you compare the resumes, you compare kind of where they're ranked, who's maybe more surefire, going to win, going to excel at the college level. I think most people would pick Tyler Atkinson. Again, no disrespect to Xavier and that great Gainesville program he comes out of, but Tyler has been one of the best players in the state since his freshman year. He's got more sacks than Griffin. He's made more plays. The work ethic that Tyler puts in there is kind of unparalleled right now in high school football.
I think what it comes down to is who do teams fear more? And when I talk to coaches or players who have played against Tyler Atkinson, that's always the one that they never want to face. So I'm going based off of that.
It's funny, people in the chat are like, Jeff firing Kirby. Folks, let me get the disclaimer here. I'm not firing Kirby by any means. I'm just saying that man, as much as he's done for the University of Georgia, where he is as a father with his children, after about 15 years and about, 200 wins, that might be enough for anybody to ride into the sunset.
Look, I'm with y'all. I already had the discussion with Jeff this morning that I didn't need him to bring that negative energy.
It's not negative
on a
energy.
Studio day.
That might be one of his best teams, might be one of his last teams with one of these guys.
So this one comes from Tough Stuff on YouTube, and you touched on Bowden Sohn a little bit, but what's your prediction? What's going to happen?
Two schools of thought here with Valden, and we're pretty close to the information here. Valden's got a decision to make. Does he want to get it over with right now? If so, he's seen Auburn, he's seen Florida, he's seen Georgia, he's seen Nebraska. If he wants to make a decision this summer, then it will be one of those schools, and I think Georgia sits in a really good spot there. If he wants to keep his recruitment going, and right now the internet chatter says he's ready to make his mind up right now, but if he wants to keep his recruiting going, then he will wait until September so he can take official visits to Ohio State and Texas. We know what that means, Kaylee. Mm-hmm. So I think the decision will come this month, and I also think that he's not going to wait around to hear the offers and the best pitches from Ohio State and Texas.
Paul Moon on YouTube says, hearing that Bo Walker is looking impressive will make Hyder sting less. What have you heard about Bo Walker from the chatter?
Great. Here's what I think, Kaylee. I don't know, because you got to wonder where Roderick Robinson is with his health. I think if Georgia played a game tomorrow, I think Bo Walker could be RB3 already as a freshman. Really talented player, durable player, tough inside runner. Going to be hard to find behind that Georgia offensive line right now. And I think is one of those guys that Georgia felt good about for the longest time, and he's really proven at every level, multiple state champion.
Let me just go ahead and stop Frank Patterson on YouTube right here, who said, Jeff, who would you rather have? And we're going to call it the water pong partner. He said Connor, Mike, or BA. I will answer that for Jeff because it is myself, 2-year reigning champion. Jeff.
There you go.
This comes from John. I'm serious. And I did it with my left hand. This comes from Jonathan Aaron on YouTube, who says, what's a good amount of camps to go to? Like, can you hurt your stock if you go too many?
Well, some people, there's the opinion that if you're already highly rated, they're like, I'm good. I don't need my rankings to drop because I'm good where they're at. I think what you really should do is to go to a baseline of camps in your freshman and sophomore year, especially where you want to play. Like if your dream is to go be a Clemson Tiger, then you need to go be seen by Clemson. And if it's $70 to pay the camp fee, pay the camp fee, because put yourself under the eyeballs of the evaluators of that school. I would think the more camps you go where you're seen directly by the college staff, that's where you need to be. Now, a lot of these other private enterprise prospect camps where they don't have coaches eyeballing. Now, there's some great ones out there. They send the film over. They send the heights and weights in the 40s over. But the more you're seen 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, you get on a watch list and you get on okay, when I go to that school, I need to go check out that kid. You need to make yourself known. And, hey, you may go there and fall on your face, but at least you make sure the schools you want to go to, they see you and they can make that evaluation for yourself, because you might just impress them so much that you immediately go on to one of their boards.
I like the comment that Foster Moss made on YouTube talking about Tyler Atkinson, saying 200 tackles is crazy. It's too easy for Tyler Atkinson. And you make a really good point that he does play in the highest classification. And Grayson is in a really strong region. Yeah. So for him to be able to put up those numbers playing against some of the better competition, I think that does speak a lot to the skill set that he has.
Here's the things I know about Tyler. If Grayson High School was playing a game this week, he would have seen all the cut-ups he needed to see for the Friday opponent on Sunday. He's been operating as a professional in terms of treatment, in terms of regimen, in terms of workouts for multiple years now. There's no one that invests more. Kaylee, he spent basically the whole month of June, when he wasn't taking his official visits, in Texas working out with a private trainer. That's one of the benefits you have when you have NIL. Adidas is already a 2-year partner here with the Acting Up brand, which is impressive to think about. And Kaylee, it's all about this. If you give Tyler Atkinson $1 million+, is he going to work any harder or is he going to work any less? He's one of those families where you get a trophy and they're like, that trophy stays in the house for about a day, and then it gets put away, and his dad says, go get another trophy. That's how wired Tyler Atkinson is.
Lance D says the Eagles are probably scouting Tyler out, and he hasn't even picked Georgia yet.
That's pretty funny. I think
nobody's going to deny that.
I think the funny comments in there right now is like everybody talking about BAAI going on right now in terms of Texas A&M's trying to create their own Brandon Adams via AI. It's pretty funny what everybody's doing right now. Let the man have a week. I know he gets a lot of cruise times, but he's working on those cruises right there. Brandon, this is a sacred family week for him down in South Georgia.
I think I can actually say, too, that Brandon is not on a cruise this week.
Oh, he's not on a cruise?
I don't think that he's on a cruise this week.
No, he's not. But people are like, man, that man takes a lot of vacations. It's like, no, he's on a cruise, but he's working those cruises.
Hey, listen, he is working those cruises. He does put in a lot of overtime for that. So we'll keep looking at some more comments here. Thank you to everyone who's mentioned that they enjoyed the show today. Sometimes at this point in the week, there's different news coming out. And so the tape shows Brandon does, they're great. He puts a lot of time and effort into them. But with such a big recruiting for the month of June, there was really no other option for us to come out here today and try to break it all down. I'm going to keep looking through. Seeing G Bama Boy says Atkinson trains like an NFL linebacker. He lives in the same subdivision as my buddy Terrence.
He does. Seriously, it's one of those kids, like you look at it, this is what Georgia's coaches and all coaches do now in this NIL era. It used to be what general managers in NFL did. They would go to Kirby and they would go to Dabo and they would go to Ryan Day and they would say, hey, how do you think he will work if he has generational wealth in his bank account? And they have to give them a very straight answer. Well, generational wealth is not happening yet through NIL, but it's one of those things. It's one of those things where you sit there and you go, man, this guy, I'm going to tell you, Tyler Atkinson is going to work harder when he gets into college. Like, this is the thing about Tyler, and this is not, people just want to know because people are asking a great question. Here's what I know. It will be fascinating for Tyler to show up at Oregon or Texas or Georgia, anywhere he ends up going. And they go, Clemson in there too. That's where he took his official visit to. And they show the depth chart. And Tyler's like 7th as that freshman on the depth chart. I think that will summon something inside of him that is almost spiritual, how hard he will work to get on the field. He's one of those players like – I know it sounds cool for reporters, analysts in this space to toss out names. I'm going to tell you what, I'm tossing around that Roquan Smith comparison like it's a 65-pound manhole cover. I know how hard that is to be, but he is the best inside-the-box linebacker the state of Georgia has produced since Roquan.
Out of all of the commits in the 2026 class, who's the one that we haven't talked about enough?
There's a lot. I think if you caught us earlier in our show this morning, we mentioned Jordan Smith. We mentioned, obviously, Kamari Brooks. I think Zach Fort is the guy that's been committed for a while now out of IMG Academy. Folks, it's like he got to IMG as a freshman, and they decided this kid is with it enough. Let's go ahead and make him a captain. and they make a freshman a captain on a team where there's 45 other D1 players, and most of them are older than him already. That speaks to how well he does everything the coaching staff would want to see, to kind of the standards, the way they go about it. Zach loves being a dog. Zach is actually from Long Beach, California, and he's been kind of frolicking and loving all these commitments stacking up right now. I think that's a name that folks probably, because you look at all those DBs now and you wonder, like, where does he fit in or whatever. That guy is going to get on the field quick, kind of like the same way Rashawn Dinkins is already impressing guys right now when he's at Georgia. When he just showed up at Georgia, like literally two or 3 weeks ago, when he enrolled after his high school graduation.
All right, so gonna get some final comments in, then we have to wrap up for today. Chef Jave Owen on YouTube, can I prank Connor tomorrow? There is a slight chance that Connor could be watching right now, but if I can pull it off, I will do my very best. Because he is going to be in person with us tomorrow. I do know that much. Jeff, any final comments for today?
Tell you what, this was a lot of fun. If you, one of the things you do when you travel a lot is you try to deal with some traveling mercies. You make sure you take your vitamins. You try to make sure you avoid the bug with traveling and everything else. I'm going to tell you one thing. I saw, you guys follow me on social media at Jeff Sentell on Twitter. This scene from the weekend, Kaylee, because it was funny. We had our folks back home at Mission Control, and we were trying to coordinate the news on James Johnson. And first of all, I want you to imagine your high school having a reunion in the middle of the summer.
I'll have to plan it, so it's not hard to imagine.
Kaylee would be the planner. But I want you to imagine it's not a reunion for one class. It is a reunion for all the classes. So this is in the middle of Miami. This is in Amelia Earhart Park. And you get there and you start walking around, right? And this commitment was supposed to take place at 12:30. Huge party. It takes place at right around 3 o'clock. And what happens in between is every class for 70 years basically has a tailgate tent or a tailgate theme. And there was a Baywatch theme. There was a Boy Scouts theme. There was all kinds of themes. And I've never seen this before in terms of your high school. And everybody gets together. It was so funny. One of the veteran members, we were at one of their tailgates, and it's like, look at all those young kids out there with those fancy tailgates with their props and their Baywatch water towers. And they're like, you know why they can do that, right? Because they got all the money because they're still living with mom and dad. You're literally walking around. You see people grilling, and I'll never forget this. I actually tweeted it out earlier today. There was a blue bull that had kind of been retrofitted into a barbecue grill. You open up the belly you open up the back of the bull, and there's somebody cooking hamburgers. You saw this everywhere. It was very hot in Miami, but the fact that someone committed on a stage, it's called West Fest, Miami Northwestern. Some people were asking me on social media, why should we care about Miami Northwestern? Well, besides James Johnson playing there, you remember Devad Wilson, Nike Man Newt? He played there at Miami Northwestern. DeAndre Baker, the Jim Thorpe Award cornerback, he played there at Miami Northwestern. And James Johnson, the guy who says he thinks he can be better than Jalen Carter, you watch him with his hat dance stuff right there. He never even got to the Texas hat. He picked up the Florida hat. No, I'm not doing that. Picked up the Miami hat. No, I'm not doing that. He just picked on the Georgia hat, put it on, and says, yeah, I'm committed to Georgia.
All right, really quick before we go, we didn't have the video of PJ Dean earlier, but I believe that we do have it now. So for everybody that has stuck around, can we go ahead and pull up that video? If you recall, PJ Dean was the one who put on his brother Jared Wilson's helmet, and if you've stuck around this entire time, then we got to give you what you want.
University of Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Lord.
Look at Jared slapping his brother on the head there as well.
I kind of like felt that on the top of my head.
That's right. You had good video, good sound quality right there. And, you know, they had the jersey out there, had the 3 hats, and you put on a game-used helmet. And Big Brother is there saying, attaboy, good job right there. And it looked like that was game used, Kaylee. It looked like it had some knocks on it. He traded some paint.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the Texas helmet. Maybe that's one of those Texas game helmets. Maybe it's the Tennessee helmet. Maybe it's one of those. But Jared looks awfully enthused to see that his brother's following in his cleats.
All right, guys. So as we wrap up, want to remind you to check out our friends at rsandrews.com. Oh my gosh, it has been so hot. This is like the actual worst time in the world for your AC to go out. And if that's the case, make sure to remember our friends at RS Andrews. The RS stands for Rapid Service. So call them in the morning and they can have everything fixed by the end of that day. That's why we recommend them so much. So make sure to check out RS Andrews for all your heating, electric, AC, water heater needs. And then, so tomorrow it's going to be myself and Connor Riley for a special edition of Dog Nation at Large. Want to give a shout out to Jeff for co-hosting with me today. We're going to have a lot in store tomorrow. So first 20 minutes will be Brandon, then Connor and I will follow right after. Thank you all to those who joined us today. We really appreciate it and can't wait to deliver you some more Georgia football information tomorrow on DawgNation Daily.